Hi, this is Ken Gidge, and this is The Art of Politics with my partner, Bill O'Brien. Hi, Bill. How are you doing? Now, you have brought a guest in who I happen to know very well.
I brought Representative Lynne Ober from Hudson with us, and I do know you folks know each other well. Not only have you served together a few terms, but you served on a commission that I set up in one of my last acts, formal acts as Speaker. I set up a commission to study the Liquor Commission, some of the allegations, and I guess you were chairman of it, weren't you?
I chaired it.
And
Ken was the star rep on it.
Yeah, there was only 3 Democrats. And I think Bill did say that this was one of his last mistakes that he made.
It was one of the last things I did.
Putting 3 Democrats
Putting me on.
And certainly there's all kinds of hyperbole going back and forth here because star member of it, Ken. That's very nice of you, Lynn. That really is.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a feeling this is all I'm going to get tonight, so.
Yeah,
that's it. We're done.
That's the highlight for you this evening.
Well, I'll get you. It's just a matter of time that I will.
But maybe Lynn could tell us about that committee and what it was set up to do and what it achieved.
We spent September, October, and part of November excruciatingly looking at the Liquor Commission in detail. I mean, there are allegations about the RFP. There are allegations about what they call bootlegging, which is sending a lot of liquor to out of state without paying the taxes to the feds. So the feds got upset about that. We had allegations they'd hired a lobbyist. And as we went along, more and more came out. We had a man come in who had been quite upset because he'd been frisked by a female agent when a male agent was there. Remember that, Ken?
Say that again?
In the cigars, when they were in the cigar store playing poker, and the liquor enforcement agents raided the cigar store.
Yes.
And then they had 2 women and 8 male agents, and the women frisked these older gentlemen, and he was in his 60s, and he found that quite upsetting. So we had a lot of legislation that came out of that, and one of the things was that we should go to 1 liquor commissioner instead of 3. Governor Hassan picked up on that. She actually put that into her budget, so there will be 1 commissioner, not 3, and there will be a deputy commissioner. I testified on a bill yesterday about contracts. We repealed some positions that they intended to repeal in 2009, but they forgot to put the language in.
What?
The 3 chief positions, chief of enforcement and licensing, chief of warehousing, and chief of administration, because we created director positions for them and they had run through and corrected all those positions. So those 3 positions are also out of the budget as well as the bill that went through. And we've had a couple of good bills go through looking at enhancing New Hampshire wine industry and New Hampshire microbreweries that I think set the tone for that. Tara Sad, who was on the committee, was prime sponsor of one of those bills.
But let's not forget. I mean, I have 2 Republicans here, and thank you for getting me on the commission. Now you will have a payback at this particular moment. But you guys, I would say the majority. Yes, I know. I will.
His payback's always reverberating.
I'm just pushing you a little. I think what was brought up was that there was a lot that wanted to be changed. Or the Republicans basically wanted to change a lot. One thing was the amendment that the former, senator who is now governor, did a lot of good, which let the commission do a lot of a lot of different things that stopped them from being restricted. And one of the things was can open their own stores, close old stores that weren't producing. And I think the thing that we both disagree with was the lodge here in Nashua law, trucking lost a contract, and I think we should talk about that. But we all must admit that they have been doing better. They're up $20 million a year for the last, I think, 4 years. Here in Nashua, because of the new stores, $2.1 million. So the Liquor Commission is not doing bad, but there is a few things.
They're way below plan. They had estimated their revenues would go up much more than they did. The revenue didn't come in this year. And then they thought it was a conservative estimate. They have now estimated that downward. And while the Nashua store has performed well, Ken, overall, the stores have performed less well.
Why?
I don't know why. But in a recession, only beer sales remain flat. They have done study after study of this. Every recession, Coke sales will tank in a recession. Pepsi, tank. Liquor, hard liquor, goes down. Beer drinkers, however, buy the same amount of beer, whether it's a recession or not.
Or people moving down, the chain of alcohol beverages arrive at beer.
Yeah, so the beer sales, which the Liquor Commission doesn't do, and we are starting to come out of the recession, but they've always had the ability to close stores. In 2009 was when then Senator Hassan put that amendment in, and they testified in House Finance before that amendment was passed, and they had a list of 60 stores they were thinking about closing, and they had full right to close those. So that didn't change at all.
But I think we talked about the commission had to go to they'll never do it.
That's the commissioner calling.
Yeah, I get.
They're trying to phone in the
questions. That's right. I get fined $5 when that happens in committee. So I'll tell Butler.
Come to finance, it's $20.
Let me ask one question, because many people will perhaps remember how this committee that you headed came about from one incident that occurred, and that was the missing $100,000
Yes.
worth of liquor in Portsmouth. Some auditors went in, as I understand it, when they were going to move a store, and inventoried the amount of liquor there before they move it to make sure it arrives in their store, and found $100,000 worth of liquor, a wine I guess it was, that no one could account for. Were surprised, came back several days later, and it had mysteriously disappeared. How did that work itself out, Lynn?
Well, the reality of that was there was a pre-move audit. They came in and they inventoried everything they had. They didn't check against what was in the system as having been received. This $100,000 worth of wine was not in the system as having been received, but it was sitting in the back warehouse. There are no cameras in this store. They've only recently started putting cameras in their store. So there's no cameras. Here's the wine. They didn't think anything of it
but
because...
the whole idea was a lot of people thought the wine was stolen. And I was one of the people who said, no, it's not stolen, it's missing.
Oh, I think it was stolen.
You think it was stolen?
Yeah, I do.
And they brought it back?
No, it was sitting there. The pre-move audit had it. They found it in inventory. They did not check that against the liquor that was in inventory. All they were trying to do was inventory every case that the movers were going to move, because they didn't want liquor to disappear after it got loaded onto the trucks and then unloaded. They wanted it to be the same. So they did that. They unloaded it.
But it wasn't stolen.
I think it was. They unloaded it a couple of days later. They ran the after move audit and they compared the two lists. 100,000 cases, $100,000 worth of wine missing. Then and only then did they start talking about what's in inventory and what's not in inventory. They never could find it. They never could find any paperwork on it. They know it was there before they moved. They know it didn't show up after it moved.
You know, I recall in a prior life, my brother and I bought a supermarket together, and it was a fairly large operation, and so one of the things that we did was take some courses on how to prevent what is called shrinkage, and shrinkage comes because people shoplift, but a big source of shrinkage is the employees take from you. And one of the signs that there's theft going on among employees is too much inventory or too much money in the cash drawer.
Ah, yes.
Because
That's right.
there's an indication that
Yeah.
they're keeping money there to take it, or they're checking in inventory,
Right.
but not checking it in. They're bringing in inventory, not checking it in. And I think that was a concern of a lot of us, is that either that was occurring, or perhaps extra shipments of goods were being given to someone in the Liquor Commission as a way of compensating them. It's
But you're not saying our Liquor Commission took it, or are you saying, oh, I want to get this straight, are you saying that it was missing, you believed it was stolen, and then it was brought back?
Ken, it was not brought back. It was there before they
Okay.
moved. They moved.
Yeah,
They inventoried again after the move.
yeah?
It was no longer there. It's never turned up.
Well, they found it.
No, they didn't. They never found it.
Oh, I thought they did.
No.
You know, one of the
It's the invisible, miraculously
I'm
disappearing
going to
wine.
find it. I want
Okay,
that. I
you
want
find it.
that.
I'd like it in my basement if you do.
Oh, yeah,
Probably is-
that's
it
all
probably
we
is in
need. Now, we're
somebody's
going to bring it
base-
up to O'Brien's house.
It probably is
Okay.
in somebody's basement at this point. Now, one of the things that I found interesting when these allegations started coming out is to look in how the Liquor Commission had become as independent of controls as it was.
Yeah.
And apparently under then Senator Hassan, it had been made what was called an enterprise, been
Yeah.
put into an enterprise fund. It had been in the general fund before. Now, we all knew what was going on at that point. What the Democrats who were controlling the budget were doing was getting that out of the general fund, about 6% of the general fund, so they could say, oh, we just lowered the spending, we lowered general
Yep.
fund spending, so they could spend more. And so at one year when there was actually a 16% increase, they called it 10%, not revealing that they'd sent the Liquor Commission elsewhere. And the result of those sort of budget gimmicks had, beyond just fooling the people, had a real, I think, consequence, which is you had an agency that didn't have to any longer go to the Governor's Council to get approval of
Yep.
contracts, and didn't have the same controls over
Yeah,
there.
wait a minute. You're picking on one of my favorite, organizations here is the Liquor Commission. What you're saying is that they really haven't done their job, or because of this amendment by the former senator, the now governor, that there is something that's not quite right. The fact is that they have the Liquor Commission the way it is right now, and you know that because they came before us. It was, since this has taken place, it's been 20 million, 20 million, 20 million, and you said it was down this year. But here in Nashville, it was
Significantly
2.1 million. So I don't think it was a bad idea.
What happened to those allegations of bootlegging? What happened to those allegations that there were volume sales to out-of-state purchasers who were immediately taking them back into jurisdictions that didn't have as high taxes?
Well,
as New Hampshire?
there were people who got arrested with more than $10,000 in their vehicle in other states for, it would be, one of them was for speeding. It wasn't because of alcohol, but then they searched, and there was the thing.
But
New York State.
What bootlegging quite simply meant is that somebody came in and purchased up to $10,000, a little below $10,000 worth of liquor. So that was called bootlegging, but that was pretty common.
Oh, I don't think you've described it. What do they mean
that
by
was
bootlegging?
pretty common.
What do they mean by bootlegging?
You're supposed to pay tax to the feds, excise tax on purchases 5,000 or more, and there was a form to fill out, and that wasn't being done. But it was also next to impossible to show, because if Ken and I decided to do that, for example, and we show up in his truck, he goes in and he buys $2,500 worth of liquor, puts it out in his truck while I'm making my
Buying another
purchases.
25.
I bring out $2,600, and now we've actually together gone over the 5,000, but it was two individual sales. And so when you tried to go through the receipts, you really didn't see those large volume purchases. Although we know that one group of guys got arrested in Massachusetts with over $10,000, and in fact wanted to sell it back to the Liquor Commission when they went to jail, because they weren't going to be able to sell it on the street. We've had complaints from New York State because we're selling large volumes and they're not paying the taxes,
But that's not,
we
that's
don't
not up
have
to
a
us
sales
to
tax.
pay them
That's right,
their
we don't-
taxes.
we don't have
And they are in
reciprocal.
business to make money. I mean, are we supposed to collect the Massachusetts tax or Ohio's tax or something like that, or?
We're not supposed to participate in tax evasion. is
If
what we're
you,
not supposed to do.
Ken, if you live in a state with a sales tax,
Yes.
there are typically reciprocal agreements with neighboring states with
Okay.
sales tax. We don't have a sales tax, so we don't have any of those agreements. But New York is butted on other borders by states that have those reciprocals. So it frustrates them, as it does Massachusetts, that we don't have a sales tax. Therefore, we don't want to have an agreement with
But
them.
I say we're not the collectors
I
of
would agree.
taxes for, and you're saying it's more of a federal. Is that correct?
What I'm saying is that when you see, for example, as I understand was the case, that certain volumes of liquor were being sold to out-of-state purchasers that really exceeded what could be any sort of reasonable non-commercial consumption of that liquor, then being a good citizen, being a good neighbor to other states, you don't promote it, you don't participate in it, in that scheme, but you stop it. And unfortunately, the Liquor Commission didn't have that sort of internal governor of let's make sure we're not facilitating illegal activity.
Well, I understand where you're
Is that a
coming
fair
from,
statement,
but
or-
we're not the collectors of taxes for
No
other
one was saying we
other
should collect
states. Okay.
taxes. You
All
know,
right.
if someone comes to me and they're obviously, they want to purchase something from me and they're obviously going to use it in criminal activity, I think just as being a good citizen, you could say, I'm
Well,
not going to be part of
can't you
this.
give them a little credit though, since the, the governor's, amendment, what was it, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, that how that is really taken off, this now they can act sort of like business people. Of course, that's just probably, we can talk about that and disagree on that.
She did us a great disservice. Lou Del Alessandro had a bill, Senate Bill 181, that was heard in the Senate and was turned into a study committee. She took the majority of his bill but made some kind of egregious mistakes in it. We already talked about having to repeal the chief positions, but there were some other things. Turned it into an amendment that came to the Committee of Conference on House Bill 2 after midnight. And we have in Finance during regular hearings and Committee of Conference, as we did during the Liquor Commission, Cecile or Deb who sits and takes a full court reporting. They discussed a 7-page amendment submitted after midnight, fewer than 20 minutes, and barely touched on any of it, and she'd made some mistakes in that. It would have been better if she had actually taken word for word Lou Del Alessandro's original amendment, which had some of those mistakes worked out, but he had had more time to work on it. And I'm telling you, the Committee of Conference for the budgets, and House Bill 2 is part of the budget, goes fast and furious. You're there from 8 in the morning till midnight or 1 or 2. You start to get tired. You're still writing
Good
amendments.
time to do it.
Yeah, you're still writing
wanna-
amendments and mistakes happen. And there were some serious things. I mean, look at the contract situation.
Here in Nashua, law.
Well, here in
okay.
Nashua, how about just the transportation contract, which hasn't been awarded? The RFP for the transportation contract is on the liquor website. On page either 16 or 17, there's one sentence that says, if you are not the successful bidder, you may not take any legal action. Now, what reputable group would put that in there? This is an open bid.
Well, if you're
We
not
should
the
be giving it
successful
to.
bidder, and it's an explanation of what the bidders are, then that only makes sense. I mean,
It's
are we
one
going through?
sentence.
You're a lawyer,
We're not the mafia
Mr.
here.
Attorney. Well,
Yeah.
Can't- can't-
We don't say to people, if you deal with us, you have to live with our decision. We were supposedly going to act legally, and we don't try to keep people from challenging our actions.
But that RFP came up after the warehouse contract was awarded, not to the lowest bidder, And of course, everybody here in Nashua knows that Law, which it had, it
Brian
lost
Law,
it.
I know the family.
And so they're going to
I've known
lose
3
jobs.
generations of the family.
But they didn't
Yeah.
award it to the lowest bidder. Brian Law was the 3rd lowest bidder, so he would not have gotten it if they awarded it to the lowest. But they've had 3 significant lawsuits, and so now their next contract proposal has a statement that says you may not sue. There's something infinitely wrong with that series of things.
Well, talking about infinitely wrong and to change just a little, I have a group of things from voter ID to wanting to tax the internet. Voter ID, where are you? You two still on? Voter ID is an absolute?
I think we're just amazed that there's no independent thinkers among the Democrats in the
Oh,
House
jeez.
that would cause at least one of them to say that this whole rhetoric about voter ID is just a sham. I looked at the vote on that in the House. It was 100% of the Democrats voted to repeal voter ID.
And 100% of the Republicans voted against it.
Actually, I don't think that was the case, but, you know, isn't there one person over there who can say, you know, come on, we're not discriminating against minorities in
No
New
one-
Hampshire. We're just trying to know who's voting here.
And the Secretary of State
you know,
has
we can
said,
argue that back and forth, and it has
Yeah, I
been,
know.
but, you know, isn't
Your
there-
opinion?
Is in the party of union and community organizers, there isn't one independent
oh, you're making
thinker?
it sound like, you're making it sound as if the Democrats are just doing something wrong. They're not doing anything wrong. The fact is that this.
Did I make it sound
this-
like the Democrats
Yes,
are-
yes, and the Republicans,
Well, that's
this
because
has
the
made
Democrats
this.
are doing nothing right.
Right. I just got up. He's taking advantage of it. Your opinion on this?
Ken, I don't know if you know, but my husband flew in the Air Force, and so he actually retired from the Air Force. So we have lived around America. I see nothing wrong with having to show a picture ID when I vote. I've had to do it before in other states, so that's not a big deal to me. I think
I don't think that's a big deal either.
some of the other
But
pieces,
I know I know everybody. I walk in and say, hi, Ken, but now the next time I go, I have to show a picture ID.
well, they say, hi, Lynn, I show my picture ID. In fact, it helps the lady find my name because there are people like this one who's O''B and I'm OB, and she struggles to find me in the
And I'm
rolls. It
Cambry.
actually
There we
is.
go.
You know?
So you're the reason that everybody puts my name down, OB without the apostrophe.
I am the reason.
Oh.
Hey, look at, you know, I in Mount Vernon, I still go in and I'll encounter people sitting at the desk and they, you know, new neighbors who won't know who I am. Now, you guys have spent like a couple of years making sure that I was the devil of New Hampshire politics, so you think they at least know who I am. People, we have
We're going to
much-
try to keep it up,
I
too.
know you will.
Yeah.
I know you will. But in this transient society, there's people who come into every polling place in the smallest of towns, and no one knows who they are, and they should have to identify themselves. We shouldn't have to wait for James O'Keefe to walk into Manchester and give the name of someone who has died 3 or 4 days before and be handed a ballot for that person. That's what we're trying to prevent here.
You can't get people off the rolls either, because when my mom died a couple of years ago, I tried to get her removed from the voting rolls. I just tried to get her removed from all the places where her identity might be stolen because I thought she's dead. I don't want to have to deal with this after the fact. And it was impossible. They just said, well, you have to wait and you have to do this. So we went through a couple of election cycles and she was still on the rolls, although she had deceased. So I don't see anything wrong with showing my picture ID.
The next time we go, if you do not have an ID, the way it is right now, supposedly they're going to have to they will take a picture of an individual who doesn't have an ID.
Well, look at how brilliant that is. Because what we're saying to people when we're responding to this argument that I don't have money to buy an ID, I don't drive a car, I just don't want to have to take the time to get an ID. So we're saying, you know what, go in and vote then, and we'll make an ID on the spot for you. And we'll put that ID, that picture and your name, into our file. So the next time you show up, you don't need an ID. It's sitting right there in the files.
Okay.
How easier could that be? How more accommodative could that be, Ken?
Well, you know, when you come right down to it, I think it was what, 190-something million, and only like 62 people were prosecuted for voter fraud. So one of the great things this was just a Republican thing that you guys wanted to do, And you got a lot of it through, and here we are right now.
You need to check some of those statistics. I did go by, I did go by the secretary and say, okay, I sit on finance, I'm into statistics.
I was going to get that one.
Yeah, you didn't. He had
I'm sure a bunch of viewers are looking at cross-eyed.
52,
What?
yeah, 5,200 people within a month
That's
after
right.
the November election that he couldn't find where they had said that they lived, who signed affidavits. And he was still working on the rest of them. And part of the reason he didn't have all of them was he had 22 towns who were more than 5 months late showing up with their election materials that they're supposed
That's
to
the
turn in
town's
to him.
problem.
Yeah, but he
Yeah.
can't check what he hasn't gotten yet, so he could only check the pieces he had while they waited for the rest of the towns to bring in their materials. But that's a lot.
Back after the Gore-Bush election and the Florida fiasco, they put together a commission, and it was headed by Jimmy Carter and James Baker, to look at our election process in this country and make recommendations. And they came out, they had a very lengthy report. There were just really stellar people on it. Lee Hamilton, the former representative from Ohio, was on it. Many very prestigious and very careful and so serious people. One of their recommendations, and this is Jimmy Carter, and what James Baker was, we ought to have voter ID. Before it became politicized, before it became the war on fill in the blank, because with Democrats, it's all Republicans are always on the war on somebody. So before it became politicized, it was understood to be a reasonable request to make of voters. It's been upheld in the Supreme Court. It isn't a big deal until Democrats take a hold of it and say, this is a war on, again, fill in the blank.
Well, I like fill in the blanks. This was a war on.
Yeah, it's the rhetoric. But you know the problem with that rhetoric, Ken, is it makes it really hard for us to move our country forward through reasonable political discussion, because what Democrats are always saying is there's not just wrong people on the other side. We can talk about voter ID, and we can talk about women's issues, we can talk about senior issues, but what Democrats are saying is it's just not that there's wrong people on the other side, there's evil people on the other side. And
Meaning
that,
from the Republicans.
Meaning the Republicans. These are evil people. They're trying to war on us.
So you're scaring.
And at that point,
I mean, you're scaring. You're saying that us good Democrats have made you guys look all evil over this. Is this correct?
That's your rhetoric. I'm not saying anything other than what the reality is. And it's not you. I mean,
Did it work?
It does work. It does. But that doesn't. Certainly, the fascist rhetoric of 1930s worked in Germany. The communist rhetoric of World War I worked in Russia. That doesn't mean the fact that something works doesn't mean
now we're
it's
with
good.
Hitler.
How
do we get from $100,000 worth of liquor being stolen to Hitler?
What we're talking about is permissible political discussion and that which is not permissible, which is illegitimate. Because if you start calling the other side evil, then at that point,
where was it called evil? Lynn's looking over and saying, "What are they doing?"
I mean, what do you think?
Have you heard evil? Have you heard the Democrats saying that Republicans are evil?
Yeah.
Okay.
but think how off it is.
Not really, but make
Ken, you haven't been on the receiving end of this, so let me clue
I haven't?
No, you haven't. Let me clue you in.
Since I've been doing a show with you, I've been on the receiving side.
It is
Marriage made in heaven, I can see that right here.
it is awful to put forward what you think are sober, reasonable policy choices and to try to have a discussion on it and being told you're having a war on women. I'm married. I have 2 adult daughters. For someone to say to me, I'm warring on women, is offensive. It's bad for our country, but it's personally offensive. It's like being told with voter ID that you're racist. We're not racist. But that ends discussion, doesn't it? To be told you're racist, because then you have to talk about, are you racist
but it was the Republicans who brought the whole thing up. And I cannot believe that you think that the Democrats had used it in such a way that vilified you.
You're missing the point. The point is that there is a issue that exists out there about how to bring integrity to our election process, to our voting. And Jimmy Carter, James Baker came down, saying you ought to have picture ID. Now, you can reasonably disagree with that. You can say, no, it's too much of a hindrance and so forth. we can have that discussion, but when the discussion turns to, for example, as it has with voter ID, even in New Hampshire of all places,
And if-
that you're racist, at that point, you've delegitimized one of the sets of participants in the discussion.
Well,
Because at that point, they have to be,
I think
they
you're
have to
going-
either be silenced or they won't be accused
I
of
think you're going
racist
off the
or talked about.
reservation with this. I really
I
do.
don't think
I
so.
think you're going off the reservation. I don't think that that's fair to, say that to me, who's a Democrat, or to others. And besides, I think we've already figured out why the Republicans had a difficult time. It was you guys used paper and we used tablets.
Well, you're
So,
talking the last election.
we're talking 47% with your man, Romney, coming out and making such statements like that?
Again.
Okay, have we changed the topic, Ken? Because I don't think anybody showed up with a tablet with their picture ID on it. So we've clearly
there
moved
we go.
away from voter ID
So that-
into the national
So
election.
the point I'm trying to make, and we can move on, because there are a lot of good issues to talk about, is that the Democrat response to voter ID is typical of the response we hear from them as to many different issues. And it's not just to say you're wrong and here's our concerns and here's a better way to do it, or what you're trying to do isn't a legitimate goal. It's to say you're racist.
I
You're doing
disagree
you're
with
doing
you.
it to keep people from vote.
I disagree
How-
with you
how
saying
offe-
that
how
that
offensive-
is racist.
Don't you
It is
understand how offensive it is to be called a racist? How offensive.
Have you been called a racist?
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Blue Hampshire.
Well, I think you
miscellaneous
yes,
blue
but I think you and I have talked about this.
But-
A lot
but-
of
but-
what they
but-
blame you for had nothing to do with you.
I understand, but that's an approach to political discussion that is very harmful for our country, because we can't discuss now integrity in elections because one group has been delegitimized, have been basically told you can't hold your position because you're racist. Or, equally offensive, you're trying to keep people from voting. And you're trying to disenfranchise.
By voter ID, Bill, and that's what the Democrats used against the Republicans. It went out.
In our grand republic, and you're talking to people whose, in my case, parents went off to war, grandfathers went off to war, your husband went off to defend our country.
Yeah.
You're
Yep.
saying to these people, you're trying to keep our fellow citizens
Oh, I
from
think
voting.
you're
That's just-
personalizing this too much.
No, not
Yeah,
at all.
no, I
what do
do.
you think, Lynn? I mean, am I
She's
way
gonna-
off base? No, am I way off?
So Ken, in finance, we have small division rooms at the divisions meeting. We're divided into
Yes.
3 subcommittees. And the Democrats caucused in the Division 1 room, and I sit in the Division 1 room. And they'd been in there all day for a caucus, and that was on the day we voted in March. And then committee meetings resumed in the next day on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And on one of the Republican desks in Division 1 was one sheet of paper that said, Democrat talking points about the budget, do not lose, do not discard. And the first thing was, this budget is better than the Bill O'Brien budget. I mean, and it had his name on it by name. And
Well, so what? That's politics. I mean,
That's what Bill is talking about, is some personal attacks.
well, I don't find that a personal attack. No, I think
don't?
you guys. Look, you guys had a hard time out there politically, and I understand where you're coming from. But you did pretty good in Hudson, didn't you? Politically, Lynn, you did get reelected.
Ken, you're missing the point.
I don't know how
not
that's
missing the
relevant
point.
to what we're talking about, so
let
I,
me-
I'm not
give-
missing
let
that.
me
We
give you-
talked. We brought
let
that
me give
in
you
there
another-
too.
Let me give you another approach. I'm Catholic. There are many citizens of New Hampshire that are Catholic. Up until, I think it was February of last year, there was an understanding in the federal regulations that people with religious objections who are employers would not be forced to buy contraception through their health plans. They wouldn't be forced to pay it. Now, I see from the skeptical
Wait a minute. And are you saying that with Obamacare, what you guys like to call it,
Ken,
that people are forced to do that?
Ken, you're a great one for putting words in people's mouths. But
Thank you.
I'll
Thank you. I
continue what I
tried.
was saying,
All
so
right.
you know
Yep.
exactly what I was saying. And up until then, there was federal regulations that recognized that people would have potentially a religious objection to funding abortions, funding contraception, either directly or indirectly. Okay.
Okay.
It wasn't that they didn't want others to have it. They just said, I don't want to participate in that because of my religion. Obama and his administration clearly made a calculated choice to change that, so then that they could have rhetoric on a war on women. I can remember before that February decision, earlier, December before, there was a debate in New Hampshire
And
in which George Stephanopoulos asked all the Republican presidential candidates, are you for women having contraception? And the reaction was
And the
puzzled.
question
They're saying, well,
is,
this is,
and the question was,
hold
bad
on.
question?
yeah, it was, because it was a telling question. It was a bad question because they all answered saying, this is not an issue, of course, that there's Baird versus Connecticut. It was decided 30
We get any better,
30 or
we'll
40
take
years-
his job over. You
30
do
or
realize
40
that?
years ago, it was decided that there's no way constitutionally you can keep women from having access to contraception. But the question came up, George Stephanopoulos was a shill rather, for the Obama administration, and the
Oh,
regulation
my
change
God.
in February,
Oh,
and then the rhetoric.
please.
Now, and let me reach my
Oh,
point.
come on now,
Let me
that's
reach my
not
point here.
fair.
It is. It certainly is. Then, as soon as they made that change and they watched the reaction of Catholics and Catholic institutions, they said, oh my God, the Republicans are having a war on women. You know how offensive it is again? You know, I'm a husband to a woman. I'm a father of adult daughters. It's very important to me that my loved ones be treated with dignity.
okay,
and yet I'm being told,
okay,
because I've
yeah,
been
but,
told personally, I'm having a war on women.
But you know, you have like the majority of everything, and all of a sudden, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you look at this, you guys, the Republicans, didn't do very well, and you're saying this is one of the reasons why. Is this correct?
I'm not talking about a particular election. I'm talking about
Being offensive. All right.
No,
I agree.
I'm talking about how
I
we
agree.
conduct political discussion in this country. And part of the approach that's been taken by Democrats, whether they're in the majority in New Hampshire or the minority in Utah or wherever they are at a given point, but an approach has been taken to maneuver the political discussion to a point where you can charge evil.
Do you
on the
feel
other
that
side.
way? Do you feel you're a woman? Do you feel that?
Ken,
do you feel this was the case?
I feel that no man should vote on a woman's medical issue.
Well,
And
thank you.
the-
So
the
you believe
men
in abortions if a woman wants an abortion?
I think when the women have 50% of the votes or 51%, and we can decide if you can get Viagra and Cialis paid for by your health insurance, if you can have a vasectomy paid for by your health insurance, then you have a right
And
to
your
vote
point,
on what we can have.
Do you believe?
I just don't think men should vote
Do you
on
believe
this.
in what they
Lynn
call a
and I can
woman
have
right?
that discussion
Yeah.
on it, and I might not agree with her. And she's going to look at it and say, well, I think you're wrong. You're giving
Yeah.
too much emphasis to this.
I don't
or
agree
that."
with your
Well,
position.
I'm trying to do that.
But Lynn isn't going to turn to me as not you, Ken, but the Democrat approach to these issues and say, you're having a war on women. You know, you're a misogynist.
Yes, well, whoa,
And
whoa,
that's
hold on.
deeply
Whoa,
offensive.
wait a second. That's not fair to use this as to use this as any
Well,
type of an example.
you've seen that in the
You
newspaper,
guys,
though.
you Republicans, went out and did some things that just didn't work for you. If it would have worked for you, you guys would have kept it up.
What are you talking about?
Well, women not having abortions is this was
First
part
of all,
of your.
Republicans didn't do anything. That was a reaction among some folks who have a religious belief that it's improper to participate in providing, either directly or indirectly, participate in providing abortions in our society. You can agree with that or not agree with it, and I understand it's a very tough issue. It really is, because abortion is an issue of fundamental but conflicting
And
interests.
I will go along with
And-
what Lynn
and-
says. It's her body. She can do what she wants with it.
That's one of the.
Is that how you
that's
feel?
One of the fundamental
That's how I feel.
interests.
I feel that way also.
The sense of self-autonomy, the right of self-autonomy, is a fundamental, important issue.
If you-
and for those who oppose abortion, they think the right to life is another
But if
fundamental
you feel that way, I'm looking at it differently, and I think you're overreacting to the situation because
I'm giving
because
you-
the
I'm giving you two
Republicans just
examples.
didn't do well.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not at all. It's not a
Ken, I
matter of
think if
Republican
that is
side.
a strong feeling for you, whether it's religious or political, I think if that is a strong feeling for you, you feel that way. I feel equally strongly that men should not vote on any of these. Abortion should never have been voted on by any political body. It is a medical procedure. Do we vote whether you can have tonsillectomies? Do we vote
Let's
whether you can
let's
have
stay
your
with
appendix
abortions
out?
because you're dead set against it. Is this correct?
No, I'm not saying
Abortions.
that at all. I'm not saying no. And I'm not even going to get into that because what we're dealing with here is the question of how we have a political discussion. Because you can sense that...
Well, we're
that
having a
you
political
can
discussion.
you
Are
can
we
sense
doing
that-
okay?
Bill and I aren't quite in agreement.
Yeah, and you can sense that Lynn and I aren't on the same side of an issue. But
where am I?
I'm not
I mean, you
saying
guys are-
I'm not saying to Lynn you're evil, and Lynn isn't saying to me you're having a war on women. But if I had this discussion, and I've had this discussion with representatives of the Democratic Party, either directly or indirectly through
Someone
the
said-
newspaper, and their reaction is there's a war on women going on here. There's a misogynist in the form of that politician. And at that point, you have to stop the discussion.
Well, you know,
It's great to have a political controversy with someone that you've taken that person and said, you're not a legitimate participant.
Problem
in the
is,
discussion. And
was
that's all
what
this
happened with the
wars are
Republican
about.
Party is you've had some really nitwits make some awful,
Okay.
some awful comments that have caught on with some other nitwit, let's say Democrats, and they've kept this going. I agree with you. We should have the opportunity to sit and talk. That's why there's a Republican and a Democrat and another Republican.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this is.
And again, I'm not accusing you must admit that you're fairly unusual in your willingness.
Everybody will agree with that.
In your
Yeah.
willingness to participate in a discussion such as this. What makes it unusual is that you don't fall back on rhetoric and fall back on sloganeering.
But gentlemen, if you sit where I'm sitting, you're talking about political discussion. You keep saying Republicans made missteps. Republicans did this wrong. Bill wants to talk in general about how does the political discussion go. You want to bring it back to what did a particular party do or not
But
do.
that's what you're basically talking about because supposedly the Democrats use this
No, I mean,
in a particular way, and it wasn't good for the Republicans.
Let's go back to like voter ID. I can be on the side of voter ID that only 20% of the population holds, and we have a discussion. You're on the side that 80%. And I'll lose elections over it. But that doesn't mean that I'm evil, that I'm racist, trying to keep blacks from voting, that I'm so contemptuous of our democracy that I'm trying to keep citizens from voting. It just means I'm wrong, and the majority of the population think I am, and I lose elections. The fact that I'm on 80% of the side, and I think actually on this issue it is an 80% of people understand that there should be a voter ID. But the fact that 80% agree with me doesn't mean you're wrong if you don't think it's the best way. What is wrong? What is the problem I'm trying to identify is the personal attacks by calling someone a racist because they believe.
Well,
in
let's-
voter ID.
look,
But
Go
see,
ahead.
I think the real bottom line here is when that discourse kind of thing happens, or if you want to say Republicans made missteps, the real way to have a discourse is to say, I don't believe men should vote on this. That's my belief. So I'm not
I agree with
pointing
you.
the finger at anybody.
But you
and I'm
couldn't
not
get a
saying
Republican, you couldn't get
Democrats-
the Tea Party, you couldn't get the Free Staters, you couldn't get anyone to agree with you on that, except probably some other women. And Republican
I
women
wanna
wouldn't even admit
is
that
state
publicly like you are.
my opinion without pointing a finger at somebody else, which is what I'm trying to say. So I use the I pronoun. That's how I feel about it. You don't want to agree? I can respect that, but that's why Bill and I can have this discourse, because I don't get mad at him. I have my opinion, and he says, okay, you have your opinion, I don't agree with it. But again, he uses the I don't agree with it. I'm like, oh, I'm okay with that.
But let us go to something, and I've said this to you before after getting to know you And what you went through, I was there too. What you went through was quite a bit. And I have said to you that a lot of what people thought about you was not you, but people that sent out to make these stupid comments. Now, we have in a paper today Representative Tremblay, who said the Boston Marathon bombing was done by the United States government. That's as dumb as you can get. The Republicans have gone against this.
We also have in the paper today a Democratic representative who has serious allegations of sexual harassment brought against him. You want to know what? That is no more representative of who Ken Gidge is than Representative Tremblay is representative who Representative Ober and Representative O'Brien are. That representative is no more an example of your party's philosophy than Representative Tremblay is of ours.
My point is quite simply, this is what happens, is when dumb things like this take place. And it doesn't make any difference if it's a Republican or a Democrat, because if it was a Democrat, I would say so.
We have to get more sophisticated in our understanding of how to talk with each other, not you and I, but as a body politic. Because what happens when somebody like that comes forward, either it's the representative who has sexual allegations against him or the representative who has clearly erroneous beliefs about what happened in Boston, is there's a tendency for each party to say, aha, look at those sexual allegations. Let's see if we can smear all the Democrats with it. Or similarly, the Democrats look at this representative saying, let's see if we can smear the Republicans with
well,
this.
it's not a matter of smearing. You got the Boston Marathon. You've got all this.
It should be sufficient to say what we've all said is, we don't agree with that. That's just craziness. On both sides. You don't agree with harassing young men, an older representative harassing young men.
No, I don't. Of course not.
Of course you don't. Of course you don't.
But this is so bizarre that, I mean, come on now. I mean, this is so ridiculous of what this individual said. It's so stupid. It's in the top, let's say, 3 things dumb to say. That's one. Especially around Boston area, and especially the marathon.
And if you want something more bizarre, go and watch the latest episode of Survivor. There's some bizarre things out there.
Well, the mother of the boys. I mean, the mother of the boys is on TV this afternoon saying that she believes the FBI planted red paint, it wasn't blood, and shot her son. The mother of the 2 boys, the bombers.
The Russian lady, the Chechen.
I think that people get very passionate about bad things, and clearly the bombing was horrible. And now you've got people on both sides. I also think that everybody gets to a point where they would wish they could pause, rewind that tape, and try again and reword what was said. I have not actually read what Tremblay said, although I've heard 2 or 3 versions reported on the news, and you gave another version here this evening.
And I've got to say that the Republicans came out immediately and said that's foolish, the same as the Democrats. So I'm not saying this is a Republican thing, or even it's a representative. It's a representative, which doesn't make us look good as representatives. We're representatives.
That's my feeling, is that we are state representatives, and it doesn't make us look good. She will have to, if she runs again, deal with her constituents at her poll.
Think she should leave?
I think what shouldn't happen is that the Democratic Party spokesman shouldn't say, this is so bad, and then list off the name of 8 or 10 Republican leaders and say each one of these people are responsible for it. We're not. You're not responsible.
Well, in this case,
Patton. We're not responsible for Representative Tremblay. We're not. The Islamic community is not responsible for some distressed mother who's not thinking clearly and making up allegations to preserve her understanding of the love she has for her children, even though they've done something evil.
I understand.
What is probably wrong here, more than anything, is the fact that our media doesn't have a self-governing aspect. They're always going for sensation. They came across a distressed lady who is trying to grapple with the most horrible thing anyone can imagine.
She's in Russia, and she made these comments.
It's not.
So-
How important is it? What is it telling us about our world
She
that
made
we
it on
don't already
camera.
know that some mother is trying to grapple with horrible events that her children are
Okay.
involved in and make up.
And do you think people should talk about it?
I think we all know it's just silliness and it's sad.
But-
it's just the same with Representative Trombley. We know that, I can't even remember what she was saying, that somehow the administration was involved in planning this or carrying it out. We know that is.
I think it was pretty tasteless for the media to be there with a camera in the face of that woman. She's grieving.
Oh,
She's got one
I
dead
don't like
one.
that. I
She's
don't like
got,
that
and
either.
you
Yeah.
know, I just thought that was bad, and I think that the media needs to sometimes rein itself back. It's not always the next story or the next piece of this story, because this has been going on for more than
You
a
know
week
what?
now.
Can you
So they're
remember-
now trying to find everything they can find that hasn't been on to keep the story alive, because that's the biggest thing going. But to have a camera and a microphone in that woman's face in this time of grief was not appropriate.
You know where I saw it when I was speaker, Ken, was, I don't know if you remember, there was a Representative Hardy, I think Marty Hardy, who was the elderly gentleman who resigned last
Yes,
time.
yes.
And I can't remember exactly what he said, because it was stupid. You know, he said something about welfare recipients in Siberia, and I can't remember euthanasia. God, I just don't remember. But it was awful. It was wrong. It was said by an elderly man who was, 97 years old. And when the press came to me on it, I said, you know, can't you have a little bit of compassion? You know, it's like Joseph Wells' statement during the McCarthy.
Yes, but
McCarthy
I
hearings,
think
saying,
the
"At the
media
long
went to
run-"
this guy, and this guy didn't back off at first.
No.
He
because
had the opportunity.
They were dealing with someone, as I told them before, who listed as his profession peddler, and indeed he had been a peddler. He was elderly. I spoke with his, they don't understand the harm they did. I spoke with his children and grandchildren. Honestly, his grandchildren were in their 50s. And the family was terribly embarrassed by what he was saying. This guy was not even understanding what he was saying.
And he was elected.
And what we should understand.
As a state representative.
Yeah, but we all knew. We all knew he was you know, an individual who should have been treated with compassion and not made into a sensational story. He had been a sergeant in Patton's army.
That doesn't make any difference.
It does.
No.
It sure does. It
Look, I
requires
understand,
us
but
to
when you
understand
make stupid
context.
statements, it doesn't make any difference.
When
But,
you're
you know,
not-
let me just bring you back to something. I think this is really, really, really important. We're doing what you say doesn't take place. That's why there's a Republican and a Democrat with another Republican sitting here. This is important.
This
And
is
we
what-
don't get it.
This is the way it should be, but and I guess the complaint I have is we don't see enough of it. We just, and what rather than us talking about issues and talking about process in a way that recognizes that we have an obligation to deal with each other in a dignified manner, we have a political discussion that immediately defaults to the sensational and to the personal.
Well, in some cases it should. But Lynn, I can't get a Democrat to come on.
Why
Bill,
not?
you know that. We've tried.
Why won't they come
Campbell
on?
should be here. Mary Nelson will be here. I know that. I mean, these are Democrats. They won't come on.
Because?
Why?
I don't know.
I don't either.
I mean, I haven't asked you know, any of my colleagues who are Republican legislators up there to come on who haven't said, yeah, sure, we're glad to come on.
Bring 'em on.
Yeah, glad to talk about it.
You know, especially Lynn. I mean, look, this representative. We started the show off talking about, you know, Liquor Commission, and your choice for choosing her to do this study was excellent. It really was one of those things where I sat there as a Democrat thinking that this was going to be used against a Democrat governor who is coming up. It wasn't. We got down to what was done. Very, very important. But I want Democrats here. I want this conversation to take place. You know, you're a very intelligent individual, and sometimes I think you may try. Well, you're not going to overpower me because I'm not smart enough to realize how smart you are. But maybe there are Democrats who won't come on for that very reason.
I'm not sure if that's the case, and I just don't know why. I struggle, as do you and a lot of others.
No,
to
Democrats
understand
are not knowing how to use the media.
You know, I know we only have a few minutes left, and Lynn is, or Representative Ober is in a position that a lot of us aren't, you and I at least aren't, which is to be intimately involved in the budget process. And what I'd love to allow her to do in the last couple of minutes is tell us where we are on there, where the issues are, and just sort of bring us up to date. What's going on there? Where are we going?
The budget as it was passed, and it was passed, as we all know, on party line votes, did include $80 million for gambling. Mary Jane Wallner, who's the chair of finance, correctly said that's not in the budget. That gambling bill was not inserted into House Bill 2, but they spent the $80 million revenue from the licensing. The other thing that's happened, if you read the newspaper today, we just got the tobacco settlement. They thought we would get the tobacco settlement in 2014, and they spent that money in 2014, and yet Governor Hassan was quoted today as saying she was spending some of that money on this and that. That's going to mean that we're short revenue in 2014 because the money came early and we've spent it.
Can I just
and the
interrupt you there?
gambling money.
Yes, but
When she's saying-
we had to, it was something that you had to spend, or we would have to start cutting down on particular programs, et cetera.
Well, let me just.
That's just politics. and that's
Because
just-
the
we don't
liquor
have it against
revenues
that.
are way down, and we got
Yeah.
sued for transportation of special ed kids, which Commissioner Toompas says we've done by the written plan, but they have fined us a huge amount.
Let me just ask you a question there. I thought no money could be spent that wasn't appropriated. So even though she's getting money in, how can she spend it without an appropriation?
Well, the budget has an appropriation, and nothing prohibits her from spending revenue that comes in.
Okay, so she's spending towards an appropriation.
She's spending towards an appropriation. The liquor revenue is way down. I know Nashua's doing
not
well,
way- what's
but
way
it
down?
is way down. It's significantly down. They
Not
had,
down, not at, it. I don't believe that it's
Below
down. I
plan.
believe it is, they thought it might be, instead of 20 million, they thought it might be 30 million.
no,
Well,
they,
we're coming to the end.
they
now,
are
and
below their
so,
plan,
I'm
Ken.
going to allow you to wrap it up. I will say that I would have thought liquor sales would be up, given the budget that we're seeing coming out of Governor Hassan's office, but apparently we're not anesthetizing ourselves yet. So I'll let you close it up.
Well, no, we have 21 seconds, and we usually keep a guest for 30 minutes, and then we usually sit around and argue after. I think this was very good. I think I'm very happy that you came in, Representative. I think it's very important. I think the conversation, though, went back and forth in particular odd ways. Fact is, I think more conversation should be done like this. There we go. But so we have 5 minutes. So, Lynn, is there anything you would like to say? Maybe a website? Are you on Facebook?
Oh, I'm on Facebook, Ken, but when people who post to me know that I post the world's worst puns. I have a very bizarre sense of humor, as Bill knows.
Right.
I post primarily puns on my Facebook. I use it to say happy things, not political things, and
Well, give
Thank
it
you
to
for
us.
having us.
It's on Facebook?
Yep.
And they can get you Lynne Ober? Is
Yes.
that correct? Is it Representative or just Lynne
no,
Ober?
it's just Lynne Ober.
Okay. You have a, that's Facebook? Do you have a website?
Nope, I don't have a
Do
website.
you have an email address?
I email people. It's posted on the website, the House website. So my
Okay.
my email address is posted for anybody who wants to reach me, and I only respond when people sign their names and tell me where they're from. So if you send me anonymous emails, or you just send me an email with Don at the bottom, and I don't know who Don is, I don't respond.
I understand. Yourself?
One of the things I want to say very quickly is how much I relied on Lynn last session. You're vice chairman of finance.
There was.
You became the go-to person. I needed a chairman of the municipal and county, and so I turned to you. I needed as you said, a great chairman of the liquor
I was
review
busy.
commission, and so I turned to you. So I appreciate all that work. As for me, Ken, now that I'm hanging out on the show with you, I'm going incognito, and so I'm not sure I have an email address anymore. Or Facebook.
Yes, you do.
know,
What is
or
you're on
any-
Facebook
anything-
as
anything of that
William
nature.
O'Brien, and your email address is?
WilliamLO'Brien@gmail.com.
Okay, and mine is kgidge@aol.com. I do have a website called Gidge World, but it's an art website. You're an artist also?
No, I write. I've written a couple.
Well, then, what do you?
I've had a
that's-
couple of history books published, one on Hudson and one on Benson Animal Farm, which used to be in Hudson.
Wow. And you wrote plays when you were in high school?
I did write a few plays when I was in high school.
Well, I think we're going to have to check out. Thank you very much.
I
do
enjoyed being here.
appreciate it.
Thank
Bill, it's always good to see you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the show. This was fun.